very difficult to try to, gather someone's attention in this space, especially when it's, sort of a subsegment of a subsegment within a very large sport.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming back to another recording of Foul Ball Safety Now Talks. I'm Jordan Scott with Brianna Ludwig. We're in the beginning of May, baseball season well underway on the professional level. I don't follow college too much, but our guest coming up certainly will fill us in on his perspective on college. Tons more games in colleges than there are in the professional level. New leagues are be starting maybe up this week. I have to call around and do some calls to the Major League Partner League teams and see if any of them have upgraded. I like to keep notes. Upgrades are nice, but they're not solutions that I desire. So we'll get into all of that. First things first, I'd like to give a little recap how Foul Ball Safety Now started back in 2019. I saw something disturbing on the news, and from that point forward, I came in contact with this guy by the name of Brendan, who's been with me now for 7 seasons. And he's an investigative reporter, and we've had the privilege of meeting former baseball players and coaches. And unfortunately, we've had the privilege of meeting people that have been hurt by foul balls. I think we've done about 80 interviews so far. And new people keep finding us. Just about a week ago, Brendan and I interviewed a woman who unfortunately was hit at Dodger Stadium where a ball made its way over the net and unfortunately found her face. It's almost a year to this date, and she may need surgery. So she was very nice to dedicate about 30 to 45 minutes with us on a phone call, and she agreed to be interviewed. We've interviewed around 80 people at this stage of the game. As I was implying, we meet not only the victims, but we've met many guys from the past, baseball players. Brendan and I, a few years ago, reached out to probably 300 or 400 guys, and 1 in 10 would probably get back with us. We've interviewed more than 30 guys through that process, coaches, private instructors, guys that own their own private facilities who played professional baseball. I would say out of the 30 interviews we've done, 28 out of 30 of those guys probably played somewhere in the professional ranks. Some played at the professional level for a short time. So it's really nice to keep on meeting new people. I've been involved with a few lawsuits, sometimes getting calls from lawyers, sometimes filing a suit like I did in Peoria, Illinois, where I hired an attorney where they were one of the worst offenders of lack of netting. And we went a few rounds in court. We went around a year. And people can find that stuff up on the website at Foul Ball Safety Now. And then 2 cases in the summer of 2025. There was a trial, and then there was there was actually a settlement. I got contacted in the spring of 2025 where a woman was outside the ballpark in Modesto, California, where the ball actually hit her in the head in the spring or summer of 2023. And unfortunately, one of those random balls, those small moving meteors, which find the pavement or the window, found her head. And we helped them prepare for their trial. Not a lot of work on our end, but we were just there for a supportive call for maybe 90 minutes. They ended up settling that case, so the woman did get something. But the fact is that we want to prevent these injuries from happening, not the aftermath of when we get the calls from the lawyer. The other case is involving a child, which America doesn't even know about this case, a major league game, Major League City, ESPN game. You could see the bat going into the stands and connecting with the mom and the child had to be rushed to the emergency room, all kinds of swelling and all kinds of diagnosis. But what was missing from the emergency room was the team doctor. Unfortunately, they really are irresponsible when it comes to at least bedside manner. They're not showing support when these people do get struck by balls and bats. They're not there with them to walk them to the emergency room. Years later, 7, 8 years later, we get a call, and Brendan ends up being retained by them for 40 or 50 hours worth of work to prepare for their trial. And that case ended up being a settlement. The family didn't get any compensation. This child got minimal care. He's nonverbal, and would have been better that the billionaires and their doctors were around from day one. Would have changed the outcome of what happened to the child? Maybe, maybe not. But it would have been psychologically comforting if if the family knew that the team was there from day one. This family had to go find an attorney, and they were on GoFundMe a few years later, and things could not have been great. And we have not spoken with the family, but our first book is going to be produced on all things leading up to the trial, which was ended up being a settlement. But we have transcripts from pre-trial things and all kinds of things that are going to be a compelling read. America needs to know about this particular child. I think most people who've never been affected and may never be affected will certainly sympathize and empathize and realize it could have been them. So, just things we try to keep a good upbeat nature here, fallible safety now. I did something in Arizona when the season was about to start in Arizona, the Major League season 2026. Shohei Ohtani, who's a Major League Baseball player in Los Angeles, very popular baseball player. He had a moment during the World Series in 2025 last year when he hit a line drive down the line, and for a moment he thought he hurt a human being, and he put his hands over his head like he was having a cringeworthy, "Oh my goodness, I may have just hurt someone." And I thought that image was very powerful, so I checked it out with a lawyer I know, and I said, "Can I use this image of him holding up his face? I think it's a good conversation, holding his hands over his head and with a facial expression like, "Oy, I may have hurt someone." And they said yes, and we had this cardboard cutout set up in Glendale, Arizona for about a week, and people stopped and posed. They found the way to the website, and they could find out about foul ball safety now, because as much as we want a dignified culture for the players, for the fans and their experience, no surprises at the parking lot or inside, we certainly don't want the players to carry on this legacy of silence, and they certainly wanna have the opportunity to play the game free from the burden of hurting anyone, and it's just an example of seeing a Major League Baseball player like Shohei Ohtani. It shows the human side of things. So, yeah, we're always excited to meet new guests, and yeah, there'll be some more publicity things and more stories coming our way. Some news is, as I was sharing, a woman from Dodger Stadium over a year ago found us. We also interviewed a parent of an 18-year-old who was unfortunately struck in the back of the head in Seattle a few weeks back. The family at this time does not want to go public, but the local news in Seattle is ready to make the news about this situation. So, but we're trying to keep an open dialogue with the news director over there, and I'll just keep on watching some YouTube games, some Seattle games on YouTube. I usually watch the Mets and the Yankees on YouTube, and sometimes I even pick up the small things that we interpret as worthy of a conversation, whether it be portraying kids eating ice cream cones and having unconditional fun, or parents watching their player uh, make his debut, and then they were interviewing the parents in the stands. All these kinds of things can be looked upon as romance and apple pie and wholesome and unconditional. But unfortunately, we know too much, and all of these experiences for the people that we call in the less than 1% club, they'll realize, unfortunately, that there have always been strings and conditions attached to their experience, but they never really knew, approaching the ballpark or going in, that it was going to be one of those carefree days. Quite the contrary. But we'll keep talking. Brianna, how are you?
Doing great, Jordan. We have a super important discussion to get into today, so I'm looking forward to that. And without further ado, I'd love to invite on our guest host for the day. He is a former college baseball player who studied sports communication at Emerson. Welcome, Aiden Rice.
Thank you guys both for having me. Very happy to kind of join this discussion. I've just kind of been digging a lot more recently as I've gotten, as we got connected. And yeah, so as you mentioned, I played baseball all throughout college. As you're playing the game, I know you guys have actually talked about sort of psychological toll it can take on players and the issues that happen with being worried about injuring people while playing the game. But I guess it's something I don't think about, or that didn't affect me directly as I was playing the game. So kind of getting this perspective now after kind of finishing up and just going back to being a full time fan of the game, and attending other college games, or living in Boston, going to Red Sox games quite often. And then even when you're at those games, you're kind of in a sea of people and not really thinking about it too much. But it's certainly, the extensive research that you guys have done certainly raises at least a lot of questions. Yeah, so my first experience kind of that I could think of when I was, got connected to be on this, when I was thinking about the idea of foul ball safety and how Major League Baseball kind of, warns fans about the idea of foul balls being an issue, or being a dangerous aspect of the fan experience, was when I went to a Cubs game when I was probably 10 or 11, went to Wrigley Field for the first time. And as you're walking through the concourse, almost every entryway into the seating areas has these signs posted, and it's got the Cub mascot, or whatever, the little bear, and he's chasing a baseball down. It says something along the lines of, beware of foul balls while you're at your seat. But the way that it's kind of framed and and portrayed there, it's almost just sort of a kitschy thing. It's not a serious warning, and it attempts to be admonishing, but it's really just kind of, it's fun. I think I even bought one of those signs in the team store after the game because I thought it was just funny. I didn't really think of it as something that was a legitimate warning, as you're going to your seat and kind of getting ready to enjoy a game. And again, so I guess I mentioned before, from there, as a player, I never really had an issue, and I guess at the games too, I always, I'm excited to try to get a foul ball, or to get a ball hit my way while I'm in the stands. I'm very vigilant towards that. But I guess as I kind of dig into the research and then just understand, now as I'm going to games as I'm older, whether you're just hanging out, having a couple drinks with friends, especially at the Red Sox games, I'd say it's very kind of laid back. Not a lot of people are, not you don't need to be as locked into the game, and you're not really, as you get older, you're not chasing foul balls around as much like you're a kid watching every pitch and kind of, pretending like you're in the field. So it's definitely, I've grown into sort of a different experience of fan going, and of just how I take in baseball games. And then, still going back to some college games. I was just at an Emerson baseball game the other night, and, foul balls fly around like crazy at those games. And, the smaller college games, it's hard to say it's not as big of an issue, but there aren't as many fans. So I guess the risk is slightly lower. But definitely those fields in particular, I guess as a player, there were some fields that were better than others in terms of having dugout coverage. And I think that there were some that had certain regulations and whatnot. But I mean, every once in a while, you just play at a field that was just a dilapidated dugout. Your shins were just basically ready to get hit with every liner that was just knocked that way. So I was actually very interested to kind of hear the work that you guys are doing going into the college game, and that's a lot more extensive than, as a Division III player. If a team was lucky enough to have a half decent field, that was, it was most likely something that was older and outdated. So I'm interested to kind of learn more about, your introduction to the college game, and maybe how, the work that you've clearly started doing, with focus on the MLB, which is, obviously the place to begin, where they're going to have the money and the infrastructure to make that happen, and make, the proper safety measurements. But I'm interested to kind of learn more about what you guys see as the process of making it kind of happen within the college game, maybe just, starting from that higher level, and then rolling down, even to the smaller Division III fields, which is obviously where I played and kind of had some of these concerns arise.
Wow, it definitely. Yeah, the collegiate landscape, what's happening in college, didn't really come up till the beginning of like the winter of 2025. So it was like a little over a year ago where a Queens College student contacted me and suggested that the balls that where they were playing were going over the sides, and there was an elementary school on campus or right next door, And I said, "That's legitimate concern." And they were concerned about their balls going over the side and potentially hitting students. So that led to a letter writing campaign. First letter led to 4 more letters. On the first letter, you get the response from the athletic director. He's in touch with the college president, and nothing really happens. But even in the tone of my letter, I said I'm not singling you guys out as maybe the only offender to this particular issue. Even recently, Brianna and I and Brendan, we did some research and we just did 46 D1, 2, and 3 college fields, and seemed to be all of them from a Google Earth had some compromise. Balls are synonymous with it hitting the parking lot or another field, and maybe that needs to be addressed. Somebody told me from Georgia not too long ago, one of the fields were associated with a parking lot where it was unspoken to park on that particular area. And I was like, why would that be unspoken? How would Brianna and her 2-year-old child know that it's unspoken to park there? Similar to what happened in Modesto, California. And it's not unusual, one or more balls are going to be hitting the pavement or the window or somebody in the head, in 3 or 4 hours during batting practice and games. Maybe some places more balls hit the pavement than others. But when people say how often, I say too often. And that should not be anymore. And there's solutions out there, Aiden, and I want to address them. On the major league level and the other professional levels, that was my focus and emphasis for about 6 years, still is. I'm about to get on the calls, about 30 or 40 calls I have to make. There was still 30 to 40 MLB partner league teams that at the end of 2025, I had on record that they had not extended their netting past end of dugout area. And when people see that 5-minute horrific video from 2019 that ESPN produced, you clearly see that no human being, even child or anyone, should be sitting in any of those sections, whether we're attentive or not. I don't think any of us are superheroes or action figures. And I don't think it's appropriate for us, even if we're diligent, even if we're paying attention, it's not going to help you get out of the way of one of these 100-mile-an-hour hook and line drives. Hunter Wendelstedt was out for most of last year after he was struck. He was 90 feet away from home from first. He's an umpire for the major league level. He was maybe another few feet behind. So, and he got a line drive right to his head, and he's attentive as anyone. So imagine somebody the same amount of feet away, regardless of what they may be doing. Yeah, you bring up some good points.
Yeah, sir. The MLB and the major, the higher minor leagues and all those spots where there's going to be, a lot of fans at the games is certainly kind of where it starts to boil down from there. A lot of Division 3 games were not super well attended, I guess, outside of parents or whatnot, and that changes. Some
Right.
schools have bigger followings or can have things like that. But another part of the conversation with, I guess, the smaller
Mhm,
college schools or Division 3, Division 2, or some Division 1 schools even is just the
mhm,
nuance becomes the fields are all very different. And the MLB,
mhm,
the fan setup is pretty similar all around, and there's going to be people in, especially where foul balls are probably the highest, safety risk in those lower bowl areas, where it's coming off the bat hot and there's less reaction time, and you're still, getting the worst of it there. But at some of these fields, I mean, you really don't know where the hot zones can be or where, you need the netting or what needs to go in place exactly. I guess that's very clear. And then it really actually at that level, and something I thought you could speak to or kind of get the wheels turning on a conversation here is how you might go about, these colleges already struggle with funding for the athletics programs, just to get, games played, travel, food. I know especially at my level, it was very much, you had to fundraise. The team had to fundraise like crazy,
right,
just to be able to travel to Florida for trips or whatever
right,
the case was for the year. I guess it's
right.
just a matter of, what might be the plan or what comes to mind when it comes to helping fund this or finding, ways to make it a priority in budgets within athletic departments.
Sure. So there's no shortage of money. It's really a commitment to the conversation. I can't endorse business as usual when unsuspecting fans are coming to places where they don't really know that it's inevitable that somebody's going to enter into the less than 1% injured club sometime that week or that month in the country. And why are we allowing this? And now I'm going to shine a light on the NCAA as well, because there's clearly solutions, and it's architects, engineers, and designers that have to wrap their head around what is happening in that zip code. And once they do, they'll finally say, "This is what could be done, and this is how much it's going to cost." And then we could address it. If we don't, then we're living in the dark ages, and we're doing business knowing that there's going to be sacrifices along the way. And I think we all agree it's 2026, people. Why do we have to live in this dark ages and this uncivilized, back and forth communication on what is really happening here? We can do a lot better. Certainly, if MLB ever had their house in order, you know how many zip codes and other places they could adopt? Any university that was justified saying we need a few dollars? Of course, whatever, even if it's $600,000, which it's not, it's probably 30,000 or 80,000 or 200,000. Whatever it may be, it's not the money. And if it was the money, then you have to say we have to call for a national timeout, or anyone who enters the grounds really knows exactly what's happening. There'll be no more people like Brianna and her children coming to the unspoken places not to park. And there'll be no more of people like her bringing her child into the facility and sitting in a place where she can just do whatever she needs to do, is what anyone should be able to do sitting in a seat. We're not action figures and superheroes, Aiden. And until we finally establish that, and people have to finally address, Jordan, tell me all the people you know have been hurt. We need to address them, and then we need to address the fact that this is still happening today. We can do a lot better, Aiden. And it's really about starting a conversation. We may affect or inspire others to say, "Hey, I want to see what's happening in my zip code," or "I'm a season ticket holder at that professional club that's part of the MLB minor leagues or their MLB partner leagues," or "I'm a season ticket holder at Dodger Stadium, and I just found out about a woman who was struck in the face, who's been dealing with this for over a year and may have to go for surgery. And she was sitting where the nets were supposedly high enough to stop the ball." Aiden, it's really about all of us sparking a conversation and getting others to pay attention to everything. And I think then we could all leave the room and let them work it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Forgive me for staying on the
Of
NCAA. I know
course.
that MLB
Of
is probably
course.
the main spot in those higher levels of baseball, and I think I do want to talk about some of those and kind of see the full perspective on, what you kind of see as the base level expectation for a lot of those. But in the NCAA, I actually think it's going to be an even tougher get to make some of these things happen, even when it comes
Uh-huh.
to the money, because one, I guess at the smaller Division III levels, money is going to be an issue. They don't
Okay.
allocate money. Athletics departments get more money depending on how good teams are, but also that money gets allocated based on which teams are good. So at the Division III level, it's really if and then at that level, it also depends on what the president of the
But do you
school.
think, right, but do you think teams should be able to operate, if we want to put it equivalent to operating like without a license?
Well, I think at
Because
that level.
I have to go to those extreme examples, because people can't justify operating their game. They could say things about no money, but it doesn't cost any money to tell Brianna and her child to stay the fuck away. You know what I'm saying? It's like that would be the social cues that would be expected. If they have no money, well, do the next best thing. You have a game tonight? Well, then broadcast certain things about this is what's really happening on the grounds. We've never gotten those social cues. At least I don't think so. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm interested to understand what do you think is the proper expectation? Now, I think a lot of it too is that, when you go to a baseball game or an event, especially in a smaller setting like that,
Right.
I've talked to parents and whatnot, and, they're very aware that foul balls are happening, and actually in those smaller settings where, whether it's a small college game or
Did
whatever.
did they see that 5-minute video from 2019 that ESPN produced, and would they say or endorse their you could see not just the 5-minute video, Aiden, on the website, which we call Exhibit A. You could also go to Exhibit A1, which you can almost retrace your steps. There was a published report out a few years back, and Brendan and I incorporated a lot of our own research, 2025, and we combined the 2. You'll almost see that once you've had an opportunity to watch that 5-minute video, you'll see those balls are going into places where 49.9% of the balls, more or less 50%, are going, and some of them do travel at 100. I don't think parents of 4-year-olds or 6-year-olds or 2-year-olds, if they knew that this was a regular thing, it won't be just 1 a year near miss. This could be several near misses a week and eventually a direct hit to the beer or to the chair or to the baby's head. So you could almost figure out for yourself, wait, let's just try to figure out how many times did we go prior to seeing this video? 4 times a year over 10 years. So that's 40 times. Were there any close calls while we were there? Yeah, but nobody ever left, right? Aiden, when you see these line drives connect with the beer or the chair, the whole row doesn't go home. We all nervously laugh it off. But is that correct? Was that correct protocol? Or did management have advanced knowledge that they may have scratched their head? "Phew, that was close. They're still staying, Aiden. Nobody's going home." I just feel like there's a lot more social cues, and people deserve to know what they may have missed throughout their experiences, and then let them decide. What we do, Aiden, and like you're part of this with us, we're trying to effectively start a conversation. And you know what? D1, 2, and 3 can have a bright future because there's a philanthropist within the zip code who'll say, move the F out of the way, NCAA. My child is playing D3. This is how it's going to go down. Whether it costs them 100 grand to make the right setup or whatever it is. But if it's not gonna be through the NCAA, I wanna let people know there are solutions out there. And instead of you and I, Aiden, fundraising for the team to go to Florida, we can get a little aggressive and find somebody in that zip code who wants to see an ecosystem, a baseball civilized society. No more surprises. Everyone's expectations have been met. We're going to talk about this, Aiden, because it just hasn't been discussed before. And we hope we meet new people like you, and thank you for being part of this conversation.
I'll agree with Jordan. I think if you're a team struggling with funding for proper protections for the spectators, it costs nothing to be transparent about the risks. I mean, heck, it's free to make an Instagram post or a reel about, "Hey, before you come see us play, and if you're thinking about bringing the little ones, we wanna be completely transparent that the balls are flying into the parking lots, or the balls are frequently going into these seating areas, and we can't guarantee that you or whomever you choose to bring, your child, your family member, your friend, won't get struck." That's free to do, and there are so many ways to educate people these days that are very cost efficient or cost nothing at all. So it does start with that education piece and that conversation. And then hopefully, once more of the general public is aware of the issue, and if they really love baseball, we can come together and either fundraise or find a solution.
Yeah, I think the main one of the main issues that I'm sure you guys face then, or that you can kind of gather from all of that is that, you're trying it's finding a way to communicate these things in a very busy media space and, in a way that is effective to the fans. It's easy enough to, cover your bases and put out some sort of PSA or a video. And, a lot of the exhibits that you guys have put up are very powerful. But it's just kind of trying to find that extra step to really get it stick with people. And I think that's very difficult to do. And it's amazing what you guys have pulled together so far, and really is this the next step of, properly getting that communicated to the masses it's tough because that's, I studied communication. That's what it is, and that's what I try to do as a marketer now. Is just it's very difficult to try to, gather someone's attention in this space, especially when it's, sort of a subsegment of a subsegment within a very large sport. And then especially when you get down to these levels of the NCAA, there's a lot else that their attention goes to, and they MLB could put up this bigger, scarier, more uh, daunting, I guess, sort of material before games, but I think by the time the third inning hits, people aren't necessarily as locked into that. It's just it's going to take a lot of groundwork there. Back to the point with the NCAA as well. I think one nuance to the whole thing within the NCAA is that yes, there's a lot of money coming in from philanthropists and through NIL funding and whatnot. And I think that becomes another part of that, where it's just that becomes a very busy space of money coming in and what to do with that money and where it goes. And the bigger schools specifically, money has to be funneled through the entire athletic department, which then gives them the power to kind of allocate those funds to different programs or how they really see fit. And at most schools, that's going to be the football programs, or some schools, the baseball programs are the biggest ones. And then actually the Division III level, it's even tougher because there aren't necessarily those bigger donors coming back with wads of money to give to the schools. And again, any money that they are going to get does have to go to their ability to have a season to
Yeah.
to keep things up. So it really, as it boils down, and then again, it's tougher to say that at that level it is as pressing of an issue because there aren't as many fans at the games. Typically, people are sitting behind a well-protected space behind home plate or around the sides, where I'd say generally those spaces were pretty safe. And also at a smaller game where it's family and it's easier for someone to give a heads up or really be locked in on what's happening and get out of the way or make the proper moves. Let alone the fact that the balls aren't getting hit quite as hard typically. Yeah, definitely just a lot of battles there to try to figure out what is it exactly that's going to draw the attention. What is there anything in
I
particular you
really
guys have
feel
thought
like
of there?
I just really feel like it's the human component that's going to respond. The fact is that I've spent 7 years and I'm unearthing this particular controversy, and the fact is it's important. And the fact is whether there's 6 people there who are uninformed or a lot more, it's a big issue. It's a big problem. And we hope we're in a free society that if we do unearth something that happens to be worthy of questions and conversations, that they will continue. The gatekeepers may not be interested in this conversation to be pursued for very long because it will expose certain things. The concerned mother who knows a lot more than she did a couple of days ago, once they get wind of our research, may say, you guys, whether it was a money thing or other, they're going to be all over it. I think people like Brianna will be justified to speak up once they learn the full extent of what was never presented to us, which didn't cost anything. But there are solutions, and that's what I hope to finally get to. I can't endorse a business, as I was sharing my earlier example of like operating without a license. If people aren't on the same information privy as the insiders are, then we're in the dark, and we all should be in the light. And I believe the baseball players who are certainly at college. Brendan and I have formally interviewed more than 30 baseball players, but I've been talking to a lot of college players or recent college players because I'm finding them on posts like Indeed. I'm offering them cash to organize small conferences. So the ad will say something like Baseball Insider Network Organizer Wanted. $50 an hour. And I'm getting so many resumes and phone calls. And many of these guys, Aiden, are talking about this issue for the first time because they're human beings and they have feelings. And I'm glad if they never brought it up to anyone and I'm the first one, it's a start. And that's what happens. They speak to me for 30 minutes sometimes. I may never hear from them again. I've had a few conferences, but it's been more of these longer calls that have been insightful. Jordan, every time I swing the bat, I have anxiety. Jordan, on kids' nights, my feelings spike. Jordan, MLB is promoting their game in Europe. They play in front of 3,000 people. They don't even have netting above the dugout. And I put that stuff on the website. I have a tab on the website called the new baseball statistic, present traumatic stress disorder, because some people may not discuss it and they may not be affected. I think they probably had a call or a conversation with their parents as they were growing up. If they knew a place where their family were the safest or where they should be is in the safest place, they would tell them, but they may have not told everyone else. So even the many guys that we've interviewed, Brendan and I formally, they give us indication that they have ghosts and skeletons in their closet from things they've experienced. We're just putting it out there. As much as I love the game, Aiden, we need to have certain steps and we have to address the past. I hope there are solutions very soon. That's what I want. And then I can move on. You and I can continue talking about how to address things, but your contributions of addressing what's happening in college or you're offering a lot of insights, I think is very constructive. So thank you for those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually interested very much in that point of the, I guess, the psychological aspect, because I mean, personally, I was actually a pitcher throughout college, so I
Right.
wasn't swinging the bat, or I guess I wouldn't have directly been the one hitting the foul ball, I suppose.
Yeah.
I never had, as even I guess I did hit back in high school, and whenever when you're in the game, really, I really don't think those conversations ever came up, or I really talked to any teammates that
Right.
had that kind of issue. When you're playing the game, you're not thinking about anything going on around. If you are, you're probably not playing it well. And
No, you can get hurt. You have to keep your mind you have to keep your mind focused. At bat and
right,
pitching, you're in harm's way just being 60 feet 6 inches away. It's
right.
crazy.
But at the same time, then yes, that also is, I as in the times I never thought about a ball coming back to me, and if it did, it as if
Oh,
on the mound, it's certainly different. That's assuming some of the risk there. You're right in the field, that's going to happen.
I
Um,
can only imagine.
yeah,
I'm only talking about outside the field or
yeah.
in the stands or outside the ballpark, but you guys have enough to contend with, of course.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting point. I actually I'm probably gonna ask some other friends who are, actually hit the ball more, or on that side, just kind of how they feel about that. But I'm very interested that you found, so many people who were kind of speak to that aspect of
They
being kind
will.
of scared. Yeah, it's
Have
amazing.
I have a courtship with the baseball world as long as I stay on Indeed, because I meet new applicants every week. Now, a lot of them talk to me for 20 minutes and I never hear from them again, but it's okay. I get this other baseball player, speaking of baseball players, and you would know this. He told me, and he's not playing anymore, so maybe it came out of his mouth a little easier. He was talking about what he used to do a few years ago, and you'll know all about this. He would purposely foul off balls, knowing his balls had consequences in the stands. Isn't that crazy? He says, Jordan, I would foul off balls until I got my perfect pitch. And I knew at the expense of my foul balls were gonna be victims. He basically told me that.
I don't think that's a concern of a guy who's fouling off pitches, though.
He told me that 10 years later. No, I'm saying, but in retrospect, he knew
Right.
there was a consequence of his foul balls. As a player, to say that now, you'd probably be pretty good at separating emotions.
Yep.
But are players doing that today? Probably yes. Are some of those balls reaching people? Unfortunately, yes. The places that have less netting, and certainly when there's no netting above the dugout in certain places. And in Peoria, Illinois, where I had gone to court, they were an affiliate of the Cardinals. They were one of 120 minor league teams that didn't even have netting above the dugout. They were supposed to all extend down to the foul pole. Even foul pole netting to the foul pole netting, it's an improvement, but it's not a solution. Peoria got under my skin, and I hired a lawyer in Illinois. We were in court from July of '23 to July of '24, and we went a few rounds, and we made some points, and they eventually did put netting above the dugout and extended it further down to some extent, but it wasn't soon enough. And all the people, I don't even single Peoria out. I single them out as one that didn't even have it above the netting, and they were out of the MLB guidelines for a few years when other minor league affiliates and major league teams had netting above the dugout. I don't even know if technically in the minor leagues they were supposed to, but if they were one of 120, I was calling them out because there's obviously more chances when there's more exposure. But more to say about that another time. People can go to the website Foul Ball Safety Now, learn about the whole Peoria matter, and we got an article in the St. Louis Dispatch. And actually, a child was critically injured in Peoria the summer I filed in '23, but it was not related to the netting not above the dugout. It may have been one of the other 40 facilities, including Peoria, that had lack of netting down the lines at the time. Each field, in my mind, Aiden, needs further scrutiny. Every zip code, D123, every professional ballpark would be nice if there was a local team of architects, engineers, and designers and put their stamp of approval on it. And if there was still risks to be shared, they would share them very loud so Brianna and others would know exactly what she's doing when she's coming down to the ballpark and where to go and how to navigate. And that's all fair. And that doesn't cost much, as Brianna suggested. And it really does start with a conversation, Aiden, and those people that are concerned about addressing the unknown factors or the little discussed factors. And that's what we'll continue to do. Did you have any other questions for us? Feel free.
No, I think I think that that last point is really where I kind of stand on the whole thing is as a communication aspect is what does the MLB specifically, if we're going to start there, especially do that constitutes being enough as a warning of sorts to fans, so then they can make their own educated decisions on, weighing the risk of being hit. How in depth do you have to go with showing statistics to people? How well do you have to communicate? Because you could put all the stuff out there. People could even, they could even direct to your website. I mean, that's the spot where a lot of this research
Yeah,
lives.
but we're
That's
we're
relevant
just we're
information.
just one. Yeah, we're just
Right.
one. They're a billion-dollar organization. A 14-year-old boy got hit at Dodger Stadium in 1970 and died a few days later. Certainly, that was the winter to have a discussion with the fans and tell them this is how many balls came close, and unfortunately, one directly hit, and this is what we expect for the '71 season. That's never really come about. And unfortunately, MLB is not calling their season ticket holders and creating these small, intimate conversations about the realities and about we need to maybe bring in a bigger power here and a regulator or oversight and let them take over. You know, in my mind, Aiden, MLB, which is a billion-dollar organization, it's come up recently on these recordings. Has MLB had a particular department of architects, engineers, and designers that constantly following and monitoring what a billion-dollar organization should be doing when it comes to fan safety? Or has it been maybe one guy wearing 12 hats for the last 55 years, who changes the paper on the printer or says, "Hey, check the bathroom for paper towels." And see if that team has enough nets. I say that a little sarcastically, but I have a feeling it's been more like one guy wearing 12 hats. So until they can tell us something different, people are gonna say, I believe, disrespectful status quo up until now, and clearly we're in the dark ages. People at Dodger Stadium, like this woman who got hit in the face around a year ago in May, shouldn't be wondering who's gonna be paying for the surgery coming up. She may have to go for sinus surgery. So, that's what's happening on the major league level, and it's almost like a carnival, like without a traveling carnival without a license. I have to come up with these examples because it's embarrassing that a billion-dollar organization keeps their fans informed by, cute signs at Wrigley Field or, announcements on the scoreboard, but we're not action figures, superheroes. The kids should have a right to play patty cake, and the loved ones could have their moments together, and you could even look on your phone for an hour, do your work, as long as you're not talking while I'm trying to concentrate on the baseball game. You know what I mean? As long as you're not bothering anybody, you're in your own space. Yeah, we're not there to defend ourselves. 4-year-olds should be able to do what they want to do. We're not there to watch our kids. We're not action figures or superheroes. And baseball players would tell you there's no way, no how on their night off that they're sitting there. There's 100-mile-an-hour hook and line drives. Yeah, I get it. The teenager with the glove, they want to take one. And even the 11-year-old, they think they're ready for it, but they're not. It's just like, gloves, expectations, the romance of coming to the game. Yeah, there's a lot of that, and maybe some of that'll have to be taken away on the major league level, and maybe the 18 or the 21-year-old will know they're signing a consent. You understand this line drive could definitely break your teeth any given day or your eye socket. You still good with it? Yeah, I'm good with it, man. Where do I sign? All right. Well, then just portray it that way, Aiden. 'Cause 4-year-olds are coming along with those 18 or 21-year-olds, and they have no business being there. It's just a conversation, Aiden, and that's what we'll continue to do.
It's not that it's gonna drive fans away, but it again, just making, like you mentioned, the conversation more relevant and highlighting it more is something that, fans can seriously think about before going to a game and
That
assuming the
that's
risk.
that that's a heavy lift, but I stay in healthy aggression, and I will stay hopefully a motivating factor for you, Aiden, to run within your circles and make the noise that needs to be made, and or I'll help you. So, we'll continue if after this experience, and Brianna may have a question for you.
Yeah, Aiden. So you sort of touched already on your experience being a player, but I'm curious, how does working in communications and having studied sports communication specifically sort of shape how you think about this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think I brought up a lot of it in terms of just how I mean, clearly how I'm interested in viewing this whole conversation is from a communications aspect. I as I'm kind of gathering all the information, it's a lot about part of it is a PR thing, and part of it is more on the law side of things, I suppose. Going back to like the NCAA stuff, I mean, I did a lot of research in schools, kind of about how they handle things, and I think when the MLB was first kind of very adverse to using their money towards these things, it becomes an issue of greed getting in the way of basic human safety and rights going into these things. And that's where I was very, initially on board with the idea of this movement there was through that. But yeah, again, I think the communications thing, I really do. I've always been very interested and have studied a lot of the way that especially in a world today where there's again so much going on. There's a lot of noise in marketing and information being thrown at people. This concept is very interesting to me in the way that fans are being communicated to. What is the proper line? I almost liken it to when I was in like driver's ed school, perhaps, and they would show videos of horrible car accidents. Does it go that far, or is it going to be more of a it has to be something where, you know, fans aren't able to ignore it, but maybe it's not aggressive enough to turn them away. There's just there's an interesting balance there within the way that it needs to be communicated to fans to a cover the basis of just making sure everyone's well informed, but also I think going the next step and saying okay, but it needs to be something that they remember as well and that sticks with people and that really at least gets them thinking before taking someone into a risky area or just to the ball game in general and just understanding, hey, maybe that adds more vigilance to the fan experience and gets people at least more engaged into what's happening. And then at the same time, yeah, just making, then it's making sure that it's as safe as possible. So then, people can feel more comfortable as they go to the game. So it's kind of, a 1-2 punch there. It's making sure that people are very well informed, and maybe that becomes a little bit of a shaky thing for the MLB. But then they can, put things in place to finally, figure out what the middle ground is with safety and experience and all of it. I think it does really boil down to the way things are communicated on the forefront there.
Aiden, this was very productive. I'll let you know that I always have my detective hat on. So, a couple of things that you may have just shared now. I'm a little bit cynical because MLB certainly knows exactly what the next moves are. I don't want for you to feel like I think they're just willing to have an opening discussion with us. This is lawyers who run MLB, very bright lawyers that have been faced with devastating lawsuits over the years. They're not thrilled about finally having the day of reckoning on how their business has been running. And then the money aspect, it's not 100 grand per ballpark. We all know that. They have billions of dollars. So if it was 100 grand to make guys like me go away and to create a baseball civilized society that everyone actually knows what is happening inside and out, they would do anything for that. But by beginning the conversation, it's going to be pain and day of reckoning. But we're excited that new people are finding us, Aiden. And I want you to scratch your head on that remark a little bit. Again, I've been at this for a while, so I'm in the detective mode. But we really feel like these conversations are great. It's the beginning of an opportunity. We look forward to connecting again real soon.
I think that's great for now. It covers pretty much everything I felt like I was bringing in, and I think it was a good conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone, and do it again. We'll all do it again soon. Infallible Safety Now Talks. Thanks again to Brianna and Aiden, and thank you again.